yards, turn right onto Dover Road. Turn right onto Dover Road. Continue for 1.5 miles.
Is believed to have been working to try and get President Joe Biden, and more on him later in the show. By the way, it is the stuff of talk shows in the United States now concerning the president's mental health, or as regards is possible, and let's hope it's not, for all concerned. Not least, of course, to the man himself and his family, that he has some kind of issues with dementia. That's now running all the time on programs such as Fox News, the ABC equivalent, and in the newspapers. We're looking at that aspect later in the show. But back to this. So Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Johnson, trying to broker this extension because it would appear that we just don't have enough time. But one of the Taliban spokesmen, Suhail Shaheen, if I'm saying that correctly, said, and I quote, "It's a red line. If the US or UK were to seek additional time to continue evacuation, the answer is no, or there will be consequences." Leave that hanging in the air. Speaking yesterday, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said we might not be looking at weeks, we're looking at hours.
It's really important for people to understand the United States have over 6,000 people in Kabul airport, and when they withdraw, that will take away the framework that has allowed us to withdraw, and we will have to go as well. I don't think there is any likelihood on staying on after the United States if their timetable extends even by a day or two, and that will give us a day or two more to evacuate people, because we are really down to hours now, not weeks, and we have to make sure we exploit every minute to get people out, and therefore, I'll be very clear, not everyone will get out.
And on this subject, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was questioned about the idea of an extension, the president's view on that, and what the G7 leaders, I say again, why not NATO? But anyway, what the G7 leaders could discuss later today.
I'm not going to speak for Prime Minister Johnson or read out the precise details of the call. All I'm going to say is that the President continues to consult with the Prime Minister and our other allies on how this evacuation should proceed from here, and he'll ultimately make the determination. So I'm not going to preview what the President will say in the G7 meeting tomorrow. At the moment, he's focused on private conversations with foreign leaders. He will have the opportunity to have that engagement in that private session with the G7 leaders tomorrow. And I'm not, from the podium, going to read out what are sensitive conversations among leaders between the United States and the nations.
All right, we'll have the military perspective of former US Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann in a second. But first, let's get the view of someone who until recently was in Afghanistan. Kate Clark is a journalist and co-director of Afghanistan Knowledge Network, and was evacuated from Kabul just last week. Kate Clark, when we hear Taliban use words such as consequences, what goes through your heart? What do you think it could be? Good morning.
I guess I'm rather aghast that the biggest military in the world, the United States, is worried about the Taliban. It's come to this pass that the Taliban have the upper hand, or at least they're trying to portray themselves as having the upper hand. And this is very, very typical of the Taliban. They're very good at negotiating. They're very good at putting their allies or their opponents in difficult positions. I think the other thing that springs to mind is that the US keeps making unilateral decisions without really consulting its allies, and they do it. Biden seems to be doing it, President Biden, in regards to the domestic audience, what will look good at home, what might play well at home, rather than what's actually going on in Afghanistan, whether it's good or bad for the people there.
So
could probably get on commercial flights when they eventually resume, and there should be some mechanism, or there could be some mechanism for getting those out more.
In 300 yards, keep right to continue towards Tons Lane, A355.
It's like ours would have to decide to do.
Talk my listeners, if you would, through your evacuation from Kabul. How orderly or otherwise was it?
Well, I was quite lucky. I was early. I had a flight out with Turkish Airlines booked.
Keep right.
I moved that forward. I could see the cities falling. I'd already moved that as early as I could, and then I had a call from the British authorities saying, do you want to get on a plane? This was on Sunday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so this was the day that Kabul fell. This was before it fell. I said, yes please. I packed my bags. I rushed up, cleaned up the fridge. So, as you do, I had about, and then I left as soon as I could, because I was worried about the chaos and the violence and the streets being clogged. So, I had a really...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto the M4 slip road to London, Heathrow Airport.
Very, very relieved.
Lastly, you'll still have friends and contacts in Afghanistan. What are they saying about day-to-day life?
It's very mixed. I've got friends in hiding. I've got friends who are trying to make the decision, I'm on a list. Do I leave my typically wife and children, but not necessarily. There are women on the list as well. Women who've had Taliban come to their houses, threaten their families as well if they don't turn up, and they're having to make difficult decisions. Do I try and take my
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto
my
M4.
family can join me later, or do I stay with my family and risk the consequences? That's one thing that's happening. Others are just appalled. They're not going to get out. For example, I've got one friend who's illiterate. He never had a chance to go to school. He lived through for earlier war, and he's put everything into getting his kids educated. He's got teenage girls he's very, very worried about.
Yes. Kate, I enjoy speaking with you, probably for all the wrong reasons, though. I'm very pitchy. We'll talk again. Kate Clark, you're a journalist and co-director of the Afghanistan Analyst Network. Now to the military view. Scott Mann is a former US Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel, author of Game Changers, Going Local.
Continue on M4 for 9 miles.
Filmmaker. We'll have more on that in a moment. But let's start, if I can, Lieutenant Colonel. We hear about consequences and a red line from the Taliban. What should the response be from the US and UK military to that? Good morning to you.
Hey Nick, I'm a Green Beret. I think we should punch him right in the nose. We should have done that at the beginning. It's good to be with you, but the way that we rolled into Kabul with 6,000 troops and assumed a defensive perimeter literally on the
Sunshine in the west, a high of 23 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. The A1M stays closed northbound between junctions 5 at Lemsford and 6 at Welling. It's because of an ongoing police investigation, and it's slow from junction 4 at the A414. The North Circular Road all back open now southbound at the A12, but it's still very slow back to the M11. In Putney, the High Street and the South Circular Road stay closed both ways because of an accident. In Hayes, the Uxbridge Road stays closed westbound, also after an accident. And between Covent Garden and Leicester Square tube stations, the Longacre junction with Cranbourne Street remains closed because of the Extinction Rebellion demonstration. And on the underground, there are minor delays on the Hammersmith and City line.
LBC.
No, we aren't taking any more cases right now.
Malika's legal firm needs another legal assistant before more cases pile up.
But we will be very soon.
Indeed gives Malika the tools she needs to judge a candidate's proficiency.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. With Indeed Instant Match, receive a list of quality candidates whose CVs on Indeed match your job description when you sponsor a post. To start hiring, visit Indeed.com/try today. Call Nick Ferrari now, 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Imagine sweeping through green fields, floating 5 feet above ground, sun on your face as you slide by, on track to your destination. Not a care in the world, as you simply lean back. And before you know it, you're there. This is how travel should feel. And on our trains, it does. Avanti West Coast. Feel good travel. Get the new MacBook Air with Apple M1 chip for powerful performance and 4 years interest-free credit until September 5th at AO.com. The destination's for electricals. Representative example, representative 19.9% APL variable, purchase rate 19.94% PA variable, assumed credit limit £1,200. AO Retail Limited is a credit broker exclusively for New Day Limited and not a lender. 18 plus UK only, credit and offer subject to status, terms apply.
So I saw Murphy Nigel playing golf, and I said, why so chilled? And he said, my car's in for a service. And I said, I thought you'd be hysterical. And he said, no, I bought my car direct from Cinch and got Cinch Care. Cinch Care, servicing, lifetime warranty and breakdown assistance for under £35 a month. Total peace of mind for not a lot of. And he said, wedge. Exactly, Nige. No, pass me a wedge. Which apparently some type of golf bag. You're in the driving seat now, Brennan. Cinch, cars without the faff. T's and C's and exclusions apply. Price based on 12,000 miles per year. We connect your business to your customers. We integrate your e-commerce with our logistics. We warehouse your stock and dispatch it every time you make a sale. We are fulfillment.co.uk. From your store to your customer's door, you sell it and we'll do the rest. And we pick, pack and ship from as little as £1.88 per order. Search We Are Fulfillment.co.uk. Putting the logic into logistics.
I've finally found a way to see a GP around my busy schedule. Oh, really? Yeah, with the Livy app. It lets you see a GP by video any day of the week, even on evenings and weekends. I signed up this morning and saw a GP quickly without leaving the house. That's handy. And the same day they sent my prescription to the pharmacy down the road. Sounds great. How do I sign up?
Download the Livy app now. That's LIVI. Appointments cost £29, including prescription.
In 2 miles, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
0345 6060 973.
Shortly after that extended interview with the Lieutenant Colonel of the Green Beret, Paul, you'll be the first caller on the Afghanistan situation. Quickly through the front pages, there's 2 main themes, as I told you, developed. One is the deadline, which we're looking at, and then the security aspect. Daily Mail, I've told you already, security alert over UK airlift. Similar theme for the front page, on the deadline on the front page of the US and Britain on collision course with the Taliban, and for the Times, Britain faces an airlift deadline. The Metro spells it out very succinctly. 7 days to go, and for the Guardian, race to complete Kabul airlift amid Taliban threat. The front page of the Daily Telegraph is a similar theme to the front page of the Daily Express, which is the aspect of the security. I think I told you that the Express has the concern, get out in 7 days or else. And this is, of course, the deadline being extended. Security suspect escaped to UK from Kabul is the other aspect that we're doing a little bit later. There are a couple of other stories that we just need to mention on the front pages, although the Financial Times also goes with the problems and Joe Biden finding himself effectively being lobbied by both sides. Biden squeezed between allies and the Taliban over evacuation deadline. At the front page, though, of the two major tabloids, The Sun and the Daily Mirror, both have stories concerning Katie Price, also known, of course, as Jordan. She was taken to hospital with a suspected broken jaw and split eye after an alleged attack. Police arresting a 32-year-old man when they were called to the address in Essex by paramedics. Obviously, we can't say any more about that because it seems to be ongoing. So those are the UK. I want to feature some of the US headlines as well on this, just briefly. And as I say many times, they do make fantastic TV news, but I don't know that they're the greatest headline writers in the world, really. There's some of my US colleagues here, or US journalists. For the Washington Post, Taliban sends fighters towards unbound region. Who uses the word unbound every day? Honestly, when was the last time you used that word with your husband, your wife, your children? Oh, I tell you what, doesn't the football team, doesn't that team look unbound today? What? See, they choose, and this is the other one, this is the Wall Street Journal. Afghanistan crisis smolders with 8 days to deadline. And lastly, here's the New York Times. Taliban demand was pull out as the US rushes to evacuate. I don't know, print is in their blood, quite the same way. Paul and Alfred, what do you want to say? Should we fear the consequences? What do you think they could be? Good morning.
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Well, they are. No, they do fly to Dubai. They let people...
Exit at junction 3. In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the third exit onto the Parkway, A312.
What if they start firing? What if they start firing at our men and women?
We fire back, and we fire back harder. We don't take threats from terrorists. We never have done. We're a British nation. We fly our flag with pride, and that's what we need to do. And we stop relying on the geriatric president that the United States have got, and stop listening to them, because we are our own country. And if we need to spend more time getting our people out on our own with more resources, more bigger guns, well, then we do that. It's as simple as that.
Paul, you've got us started. More views coming in. Thank you for that. Have yourself a safe day. There are other stories that, of course, we will continue to cover, not least that Extinction Rebellion, as we told you yesterday, they came to town, and indeed, as was widely predicted, they blocked off quite a big part of London. Which is Matthew Thompson joins us from the so-called Pink Table in Covent Garden. Explain the background of that, Matt. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, Extinction Rebellion have, as you say, blockaded London's West End in the first day of their 2-week protest. The centre of the city was flooded with sound and colour, particularly the signature drum beats that became so familiar to Londoners the last time Extinction Rebellion brought the capital to a standstill in 2019. Protesters have erected a giant pink table on one of Covent Garden's busiest junctions. It's emblazoned with the words, "Come to the table," and currently the whole area is cordoned off by police. Officers tell me there are still about 30 protesters on the site, presumably many of them chained or glued.
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
Yet been removed. The table itself is still there, but it's now covered in scaffolding, presumably as it's in the process of being dismantled and those protesters removed. But for most of the day, yes,
Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
they let the protesters make their point until around 8 p.m. They did set up cordon and stop people coming in and out, but it wasn't until after that, after 8 o'clock sometime, when they stepped in and started to make arrests. Before that point, it's indicative, they'd made just 8 arrests throughout the whole day, but then in the evening that number ballooned to over 50 and potentially more by the time we get the next update this morning. But it marks, I think, Nick, an interesting shift in strategy by the police, who did seem more content to just allow that disruption to take place for most of the day. And when you interviewed the commissioner of the Met, Cressida Dick, a few weeks ago, police had just dismantled a gazebo that was sheltering 3 hunger-striking Gurkhas outside Downing Street. They got that down pretty sharpish, and it offers an interesting comparison, let's say, with the Pink Table, which is still standing this morning.
the bylaws do not allow for what might become a permanent encampment.
Do they allow for United Oxford service?
Partly because other people want to come in there. We don't want, the law is suggesting that people shouldn't be able to just stay there forever opposite Downing Street, which some people would. But the officers that you see on the video are extremely polite, they're extremely professional, and they're doing their job.
You can pitch a tent if you're XR, but you can't if you're an old boy, a Gurkha, go under an awning.
That's not a fair comparison. Yes, there are places in London where that bylaw does not exist.
And officers will sing and skateboard with XR and take away Gurkha's covering.
We police hundreds and hundreds and hundreds every year. You're going back 2 years to one incident. We try to act professionally on all occasions. We don't always get it totally right.
Now, yesterday, Nick, I spoke to Extinction Rebellion spokesperson, a woman by the name of Gully, and I asked her if they were happy with that more permissive police response. She even mentioned, Nick, your interview with the Commissioner.
I would say, I use Cressida Dick's word, I say I'm disappointed, because they've immediately cordoned off the small junction that we are disrupting temporarily.
In a quarter of a mile, at Wagoners Roundabout, take the second exit and stay on the Parkway, A312.
Everybody, all members of the public, to come and take their seat at the table. We're calling it crisis talks. This government has shown that they refuse and are incapable of responding to this emergency by bringing people together to have the important discussions and make the decisions that are needed. You'll see
the police are letting you, though, for the most part, aren't they?
I wouldn't say they're letting us. I mean, the police are obviously reacting under Cressida Dick's orders to be a bit quicker and tougher. They've cordoned us. They're not letting any members of the public in.
But this was just the opening salvo, Nick. Extinction Rebellion have encouraged their supporters overnight to come back today ready to cause more beautiful chaos. The question is how much...
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway. Continue on A312 for 1.5 miles.
Matthew Thompson reporting from Covent Garden. Police being polite and professional. Meanwhile, if you live in that area, I doubt you had a lot of sleep. You've got a baby that you're trying to get off or something such as that. We're looking at that in more detail later in the show. Also coming up later in the show, President Joe Biden and whether he's fit for office is now the stuff of chat shows across the whole gamut, ABC, and this is from Fox, Rachel Campos Duffy.
No one knew better his state than Dr. Jill Biden. And if you ask me, the most patriotic thing Jill Biden could have done was tell her husband and not let him run in this mental state that he's in.
Fit for office, there's a question mark at the end of that. 7:31. This is Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari on LBC. The news is with Simon Conway.
G7 leaders will hold an emergency virtual meeting on Afghanistan later as the race to evacuate people from Kabul continues. Boris Johnson is expected to push President Joe Biden to delay the withdrawal of US troops beyond his deadline of next Tuesday. 2 drivers have been arrested after a serious collision on the M25 left 3 people dead. A 4th is in hospital following the crash involving a lorry, a minibus and a car near Waltham Abbey in Essex yesterday evening. The NHS says blood pressure checks will be offered to people aged 40 and over in high street pharmacies from October. Health officials estimate the rollout could save 2,000 lives and prevent thousands of strokes and heart attacks over the next 5 years. And the weather, sunny spells across most parts, particularly in the west where it will feel very warm. Cloudier and cooler around some northern and eastern coasts, a high of 23 degrees.
This is LBC. More and more people are using My Smart Desk to make smart working even more flexible. It'll raise and lower into any sitting or standing position at the touch of a button. And now comes with built-in USB-C and wireless smartphone charge points. Available for same-day dispatch for just $3.99, including free delivery. The future is flexible at mysmartdesk.co.uk. Rated excellent on Trustpilot.
The Admiral and Mrs. Taylor set out on a lovely picnic in a hot air balloon. But things didn't go to plan.
Pesky seagulls, they ruined everything.
I know.
They not only wrecked my son's car with my roast chicken, but they also demolished Mum's chimney and her garden.
But you saved the day with Admiral Multicover.
Mrs. Taylor insured her family cars and homes, all at different addresses, on a single multi-cover policy. Admiral Multicover, rewardingly simple.
Just think, an office deep clean that helps protect your workplace for up to 28 days. That's Ice Shield from Ice Cleaning. Using electrostatic technology, Ice Shield is effective at protecting the workplace, giving peace of mind for a safer working environment for up to 28 days. Protect your team with Ice Shield from Ice Cleaning, the UK's cleaning experts. icecleaning.co.uk.
Get the new MacBook Air with Apple M1 chip for powerful performance and 4 years interest-free credit until September 5th at AO.com, the destinations for electricals. Representative example, representative 19.9% APR variable, purchase rate 19.94% PA variable, assumed credit limit £1,200. AO Retail Limited is a credit broker exclusively for New Day Limited and not a lender. 18 plus UK only, credit and offer subject to status, terms apply.
Hi, I'm Zane, a customer service assistant for TfL. As you return to our network, let me remind you that you can travel safely because we're cleaning regularly with antiviral disinfectant, providing over 1,000 free hand sanitizer stations across the network, and our ventilation systems frequently circulate fresh air on our tubes, trains and buses. Please remember, you must wear a face covering over your nose and mouth at all times, unless you are exempt.